We are back. We're talking about mule deer, which, if you don't know by now, they are the most amazing animals in the entire world. Nothing better than a mule deer. But today we're talking about what does a mule deer eat. A lot of it's based on seasonality, and we're going to basically dive into how that changes throughout the year and why you need to know that if you want to be a more successful hunter. One thing I'm very passionate about, it should go without saying, if you find an area with better, higher quality groceries, you're going to find more animals. That's just a straight fact, because that area is more capable then of supporting more mule deer. So how do you find that? Well, that's what we're going to try to dive into right now, because you'll be able to use this information when you're e-scouting, putting boots on the ground, learning a new unit, and try to put your best foot forward by understanding all these different things about why mule deer are where they are during certain times of the year. So higher quality feed, be number one. Try to find that. You're going to find mule deer, whether it's going to find does or you're also going to be finding bucks, because then later on you're going to find does, you can find bucks if you're hunting a rut, or vice versa. You're hunting in the summer months, you want to find a high quality feed because that's a higher chance of finding more bucks and potentially some bigger bucks during those like even early archery hunts. So one of the biggest questions about what do mule deer eat is, are they browsers or are mule deer grazers? It's a very important distinction you need to make when you're discussing mule deer and what they eat. Mule deer, again, primarily eat forbs, which are going to be your leafy, flowering plants. They also consume, like I said, twigs, trees, woody shrubs. They do eat some grasses, but not very often. I'll definitely get into that in a little bit further down below. But mule deer are very selective on what they eat. They search out more of the nutrition-rich food available, depending on the season, depending on their nutritional requirements, but they are kind of very selective in a sense on what they're eating at what times of the year. I read also that mule deer kind of have a sticky tongue, and what that means is they'll carefully choose exactly what they want on a select piece of area where they're going to be eating. So they literally search out whatever they really like and enjoy, and they'll avoid other items that they easily could eat because they're trying to actually grab that stuff that's actually more flavorful, more palatable, and it's a kind of a sticky tongue in that sense. Like you can literally, there's cool studies out there where they dropped a bunch of different pellets on the ground, and mule deer actually selected, they ate a lot of it, but there was a certain type of pellet that was on the ground that they consumed an entire thing of it and left all the other stuff on the ground with it. So they were able to pick apart what they liked and what they didn't like to eat the stuff that was more higher in nutritional value for that deer. And that's why, again, I love reading biology studies. You can get some cool information about mule deer in them. It should really go without saying, but if you find the quality feed, you find the deer. It's a very simple thing to say, but it's also very complex, because a lot of times you might look at an environment, all the feed, the habitat looks exactly the same, but you find that quality stuff, that's where the deer are going to be. And you just got to try to figure out how to hone in on that when you're out there doing boots on the ground. It's going to be a little bit more difficult when you're e-scouting, but once you're out in the field, you'll probably be able to look at a mountain type, see where the deer are at, and realize there's probably some more quality feed there, why they're there, when they're there, and start making notes on some of your mapping applications to start to figure that out. But when it comes down to it, again, like I said, mule deer, they're browsers, but they're also considered opportunistic feeders. They'll basically search out the best forage available during that specific day, during that specific month, or that specific time of year that they need to gain all the nutritional requirements from. What's really cool too, again, biology reports. So forbs and shrubs often exceed 80% of a mule deer's diet. Again, they do eat grasses, but not as often. They definitely will put out lots of extra effort to search out forbs, especially during the summer months. So what exactly are those plants that mule deer are going to be consuming during certain times of year? Well, again, you got the browse/shrubs, you got your forbs, and you got your grasses. Instead of me going through a giant list and naming them all off, I'll toss it on the screen. You guys can see a bunch of examples. Obviously, it's not going to be an extensive, exact list, but it'll give you a rough idea of what mule deer are consuming on the browse shrub side, the forb side, and the grasses side. It'll make it a lot easier than me just going through a big giant list. But there's a ton of stuff that mule deer will eat throughout the year. And I think it's kind of important to understand the names of them. You're probably not going to go out in the field and be able to identify every single one. I know I definitely can't, but it's just something to keep in mind. That way you can start looking those up on the internet, maybe start figuring out what those actually look like. And then that way you know when you see an animal in the field, what it's actually consuming. So along those cool lines of biology stuff, so deer actually have evolved a complex digestive system that actually allows them to acquire energy and nutrients efficiently from low quality plant foods by basically regurgitating and rechewing food. More cool things. So how much food do mule deer need per day? So summer, this was a study on non-lactating females. They found that they eat about 2.87 pounds of food per day, which is about like 2,800 calories to 3,800 calories per day. And the coolest part, which this is again, you can use when you're out there either putting boots on the ground, scouting in the summer, or maybe even during a hunting season, that foraging time for mule deer on average is approximately 10 to 11 hours per day. Information that you need. So there actually is the deer are actually going to be on their feet more times than you think they are. You might just not be able to see them a lot, but like a lot of that could be at night too. So it's like, it's not a cut and dry thing. Those are not all 10 and 11 hours during the daylight. There could be some nighttime hours too, but they do spend a lot of their day out foraging. This is a giant hidden gem I want to talk about right now. I've talked about it a few times. It's one I've kind of kept in my back pocket for a little while, but back in the day I used to have an app on my phone where I could identify plants, okay? And like I said before, it's so hard to know, like, all right, what is this plant, what is this plant, what is this plant out there when you're in the mountains? You could talk about what mule deer eat all day long, but trying to say like, all right, this is this plant, what does that mean to me? Because we're all gonna forget what a plant looks like. But the easiest way to do this, let's say I'm sitting there glassing, I see a bunch of mule deer bucks, I see them feeding on a certain vegetation type. I can maybe glass it really far away, I can see what it is, I know it. Maybe I let those mule deer get off that side of the mountain, or I find that same sort of vegetation in a different area. I walk over there, I want to analyze what that is. I take pictures of everything when I'm out in the field, so I'm going to reference what they're eating right now and by taking a photo. But then what you can do though is iPhone actually has this little hidden feature in it that they don't talk about, no one talks about. Super awesome dude actually reached out to me on Instagram and let me know that iPhone actually has this built-in feature. I no longer have to pay for those apps to do plant identification. So you see that area where that vegetation type of mule deer is feeding on, you go over there, like I said, the different area, take a photo of it, tap on that photo once you open it up on your phone, and you're going to get a little menu button at the bottom. There's gonna be a little eye with some stars near it. You tap on that, it's gonna pull up information about that photo, f-stop, all that stuff, lighting. But up at the top of it, it'll say, look up plant. And as long as you have some service, or you can do this once you get back off the mountain too, as long as you have cell phone service, Wi-Fi, you tap look up plant, it'll pull that up somehow, reference across the whole internet, and it will tell you exactly what that plant is. And then you can write that down in your notes that you were glassing up a deer on X day at this time, and he was eating that said plant. So that is very huge to know, like, what plants to key on when you're out there. Are you hunting in August, high country elevations for archery deer? September, late September, even in early October or November? You can basically start snapping pictures, tap on that little eye on the photo, figure out exactly what they're eating in your area during that type of year, and that way you will be way more ahead, because then you can start to figure out, all right, we're gonna start focusing in on those habitat types because we're physically seeing deer. Again, this is the same thing I always say. What are they eating that specific day during that specific time of year, the whole monthly seasonality thing? Like, that is very, very important for honing in on why deer are where they are on those specific days. Because at the end of the day, that's what we need to be figuring out. That's the piece of the puzzle that's gonna help us be more successful, is why is that animal there on that specific day? And a lot of that's based on food, cover, seasonality, that sort of thing. So that's a great little tip that you definitely need to start utilizing when you're out in the field. As again, seasonality, so once the summer months progress, you can start to get drier periods throughout the summer. Why is that important? Well, at certain points of the year, those forbs are going to start drying up. It's not going to be as nutritional value, not going to have as much nutritional value as they once did early in the year. So now, as like late summer, early fall hits, again, plants are drying out. So mule deer are now going to begin their switch from forbs to browse and shrub type habitat. And this is where that's going to pay off, because you do a bunch of early summer scouting. You want to hunt some bucks in September, late September. Well, they're probably not going to be exactly where you found them before, or they're just going to be switching over their diet to browse and shrubs. You're not going to be out in the open anymore chasing those flowers. They're now going to be more like in those timber areas. And that makes sense too when you think about the biology of deer and where they're at, because they can get their browse and shrubs in the cover. They don't have to go out in the open anymore. So plant types you're going to be considering, again, there's going to be a plethora of them. I'm not going to name them all. You have your service berries, mountain mahogany, you get bitter brush, chokecherry, elderberry, et cetera, et cetera. Really good areas to find some of these stuff: north-facing slopes, bottom of draws, any place where a little thicker vegetation, a little bit more cover. You might find some of these more vegetation types during the fall. As we're talking about the seasonality, now you might get into some of that late fall or winter type browse. Mule deer, again, are going to switch what they eat. That's why they're kind of that opportunistic feeder. They are browsers, but whatever the best time of food for them during that type of year, they're going to key on that. So when snow stacks up, deer are going to switch over, again, browse. So you're talking about your leafy twig growth of shrubs, trees, et cetera. You got sagebrush, bitter brush, mountain mahogany, cliff rose, rabbit brush. You got scrub brush, serviceberry, juniper, and I've even seen them eat a bunch of willows before too. So another thing I really key on using GOHUNT maps is going to be the terrain analysis tool. It's one of my favorite tools of all time, but the best way I like to use it, I can go in and notice where I'm seeing animals. I always have those animals marked on a map. I'm gonna start keying in on, okay, what's the slope, what's the aspect, and what's the elevation of that. And I can start to try to fine tune and narrow those bands down, and then try to dive in with satellite imagery to actually look at what's that habitat look like on a map, what's it look like in other areas of the unit, to kind of cross-reference and try to find other places to hunt and hopefully find deer using a map. And the last one too is like really big to me. You guys know one of the most badass features we recently launched on GOHUNT Maps: historical imagery. So you actually use historical imagery a lot to find out what areas are going to be potentially better for mule deer at certain times of the year. You can go back in time and figure out where's that green vegetation at. If you find that green vegetation, there's probably going to be some flowering plants there. There's probably going to be some forbs. Maybe they're going to be crushing those groceries that time of year. So if you can look at historical imagery, maybe that historical imagery was taken in like June, everything's not grown up yet. Take that historical imagery, drop it back. Try to find some July, August, maybe September months. Start looking at that vegetation types. Again, keying in on that edge habitat, those areas, that are right next to openings. I won't look at a giant opening and be like, oh yeah, that looks green way out in that middle of that opening. Mule deer, for the most part, aren't going to be there during daylight hours, unless it's maybe a high country summer hunt for that matter. But that edge habitat, that's where the vegetation is usually of higher quality, and that's normally where I find bigger deer, because they have the security, they have the cover right next to them, but they also have the nutritional requirements right next to that edge, not out in the open, but usually within like 80 yards of an edge area. So I'll start to look at historical imagery around those little edge areas and try to figure out what it looks like, what the vegetation, if it's burnt, if it's not good. But you can find a lot of information using historical imagery on just vegetation types, and that's, again, basically what mule deer eat. So using those tools in a combination with each other is going to put your best foot forward to have success this fall. Again, biology is everything. I love learning about this stuff, read this stuff constantly. The more you know, the better hunter you'll be. Knowledge is power. And use that with a combination of maps. Do some e-scouting, do some boots on the ground. You're going to find deer, and you're going to start killing deer, and then eventually start killing bigger deer, which is what I like doing, chasing old mature bucks. So hope you guys enjoyed the video. Again, there's a lot there. And if you have any questions, comments, concerns, hit me up. So thanks, guys.